The wedding is imminent, yet he must accompany his new lover abroad for treatment. On the phone, Ju Hui Chuan's voice blends with the loud announcements of the airport lobby, carrying a tired loftiness. Gigi, when I return in 2 years, I will give you a grand wedding. Lin Yao's depression and anorexia have flared up again. If she leaves me, she won't survive, you understand. I gaze at the endless rain outside the window, and my throat feels as if filled with shards of glass, unable to swallow, yet unable to spit out. I don't want to wait anymore. I hold my phone, my voice strikingly calm. Ju Hui Chuan, let's break up. The other end of the line paused for 2 seconds, then came a very soft laugh, faintly indulgent and mocking. Be good, don't cause trouble, he sighed, as if soothing a willful child. I know you've been looking forward to this wedding for a long time, but I'm really stretched thin right now. Gigi, you need to face reality. His tone suddenly turned cold and hard. With precise control, if we break up, who will pay for your brother's future medical expenses? In the ICU, it's 8,000 a day. How much can your fragrance-making hobby earn? Listen to me, you've been well taken care of by me all these years, haven't you? Don't make me angry. I lowered my gaze, my sight resting on the cold, unengraved black urn in my arms. Ju Hui Chuan. I opened my mouth, but found I had no strength left to question. All right, we're boarding soon. He didn't wait for my reply and spoke directly. I deposit transferred 500,000 into your card. Choose any bag you want for yourself. Stop dressing so plainly. When I take you out to entertain clients, others will think I'm mistreating you. Before the words were finished, the call was already disconnected, and the dial tone in the receiver sounded like some countdown, utterly announcing the death of my 5 years of youth. Ju Hui Chuan will probably never know that just 3 days ago, my brother left forever due to organ failure, dying on that cold operating table. That day, I called him 47 times. He didn't answer a single time and only sent a WeChat message late at night. Lin Yao had a breakdown by the seaside. My phone was on silent. Gigi, your brother's illness is chronic. Don't always use it as an excuse to question my actions. It's unbecoming. In his eyes, begging him for my brother's life was something ugly. He was used to enclosing me with money and protection. For 5 years, under the pretext that your brother needs treatment, you need to take care, like boiling a frog in warm water. He severed my social circle and forced me to quit my beloved perfumery career. Gigi, your personality is too quiet. You're not suited for the deceitful world of the workplace. Stay obediently behind me, and I will keep you and your brother fed and clothed for life. I believed him. I cut off my favorite long skirt and changed into the white shirt he preferred, looking completely harmless. I put away all the perfumery vials, washed dishes, and cooked every day, just so he could come home to a drinkable post-alcohol soup at the right temperature. I thought this was love, until my brother's body was pushed into the crematorium. As I watched the raging flames, I suddenly realized this was not love at all, but a spiritual strangulation under the name of salvation. I stood up with my brother's ashes in my arms, not crying, and I didn't call Ju Hui Chuan again. I took out my phone, with the 50 million he had just transferred over, along with all the money he had given me in the name of living expenses over the years. I returned it to his private account in full, with only 4 words in the remark, clear between us, goodbye. As I stepped out of the hospital doors, the cold wind carried raindrops that pelted my face. I casually tossed the $1 million wedding dress, custom made for tomorrow's fitting by a high-paid French designer, along with its packaging, into a roadside trash can. Trash belongs in the trash can. My older brother's funeral was simple and bleak, because Ju Hui Chuan has been isolating himself, consciously or unconsciously, for these years. I had almost no friends I could contact. I stood alone under a black umbrella in the rain at Nanshan Cemetery, watching workers place that small urn into the grave. Miss Jiang, my condolences. A huge black umbrella suddenly opened above my head, blocking the cold rain from the sky. I turned my head and saw a man in a black coat, with a tall, upright demeanor, wearing rimless glasses, his brows and eyes radiating the gentleness and composure that come from years of soaking in books. The best brother I had in college, He Yang, the youngest visiting professor at Haicheng University. Mr. He, thank you for coming. My voice was hoarse as I gave a small bow. He Yang looked at my pale, almost paper-white face, and did not offer any feigned courtesy. He simply took out a clean handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to me. Before your brother died, he left me a letter. He asked me to tell you, Gigi, you belong to the wind. You should not be confined under anyone's roof. My eyes instantly burned, and the hot tears finally fell. If you are willing, I will walk the road with you from now on. He Yang's voice was not loud, yet carried a strange sense of stability, no condescending pity, only equal respect. In the following half-month, I moved out at the fastest speed from Ju Huichuan's apartment in the city center, leaving it spotlessly clean. I didn't take any of the brand name bags, expensive jewelry he bought, or even the artworks he thought would display his taste. I only carried away a few old books that my elder brother left, and the set of perfume-making tools that had long gathered dust back then. During this period, far abroad, Ju Huichuan still maintained his aloof care over me. Gigi, did you receive the money? Don't throw a tantrum and return the money. Your brother's dialysis fee next week can't be delayed. I took Lin Yao to see the snows of the Alps today. She's in a much better mood. I saw a necklace tee that looks perfect for you, so I asked the assistant to mail it back home. Remember to sign for it. Gigi, why don't you reply? Stop. My patience is limited. Staring at the messages that kept popping up on the phone screen, I didn't even feel the urge to block him. I simply pulled out the SIM card bound to him, cut it in half, and tossed it into the sewer. He was forever certain I couldn't live without him, certain I had no survival ability, certain my brother's illness was my fatal weakness. He was like a brilliant tamer, wielding a whip called medical expenses, forcing me to bow to survive. But he didn't know that the puppet he tamed had long since died with my brother on that rainy day. I returned to the fragrance world. The once promising figure who had been shelved again picked up the test tubes. No longer obliged to please the delicate white tea scent that Ju Huichuan liked, I blended a highly aggressive woody rose with cold cedar. With He Yang's help, I established my own independent perfume studio. He never nitpicked about my work, never spoke the poisoned words wrapped in sugar like you're exhausted. Quit and I'll support you. And only, while I stayed up late blending formulas, quietly placed a cup of warm jujube tea at my side at a 45-degree angle. There was a time when my finished perfume was unreasonably returned by a client, and I slumped on the sofa in defeat. He Yang walked over and gently rubbed my hair. Jiangji, your perfume isn't the problem, they just don't understand it. What you need is a market that understands you better, not you changing yourself. This is what Ju Huichuan can never say aloud. He would only say, Gigi, clients are gods. You must learn to be more tactful. Look, without me, you can't even handle this small matter, can you? 3 years, more than 1,000 days and nights, in the humane soil that He Yang gave me, I regrew bones and blood, blossomed wildly and brilliantly. 3 years later, at Haicheng Private Maternity Hospital, sunlight streamed through the large floor-to-ceiling windows onto the ward. The air was free of the acrid disinfectant smell. Only a faint chamomile fragrance remained. This was specifically blended by He Yang to soothe my postpartum emotions. Yes, I got married to He Yang, and 3 days ago we welcomed a healthy daughter, named He Shi. He Yang sat at the edge of the bed, carefully kneading my swollen calves. His movements were so gentle, his eyes as soft as a spring river. Still sore, much better. Professor He, press any harder and I'll fall asleep, I teased with a smile. Right at that moment, the spare phone on my bedside table suddenly vibrated. It was the old phone I kept specifically for receiving messages from overseas antique spice merchants. It was loaded with a new SIM card but still bound to some old overseas accounts. He Yang glanced at the screen, a string of unlabeled international calls. Shall I answer it for you? Okay. I closed my eyes, not paying it any mind. He Yang pressed the answer button. Before he could speak, a highly confident, even, a surprisingly cheerful male voice came from the other end. Gigi, I've returned to the country. The 2-year period has slightly overrun. Sorry, I've already had the assistant book the very one bridal shop in the South City. Come try on wedding dresses now, and tonight I'll take you to your favorite French restaurant. You've endured a lot these past 2 years. I'll make it all up to you today. The hospital ward was very quiet, and Ju Huichuan's voice came through clearly. I suddenly opened my eyes. And there wasn't the slightest ripple in my heart. I just found it absurd and ridiculous. 3 years had passed. He had enjoyed carefree overseas days with Lin Yarrow for 3 years, and now that he was back in the country, he didn't even say a word of greeting, directly issuing orders as if I were an item stored in his warehouse, waiting to be retrieved whenever he returned. He Yang paused, looked at me, and I gave him a slight shake of the head. He Yang's expression remained unchanged. His tone was warm and courteous, yet with an unfathomable distance. Sorry, sir, she is currently postpartum and cannot be exposed to wind or try on wedding dresses. As for compensation, my wife does not need anyone's compensation, so please don't trouble yourself. The line went dead. It became deathly silent. After a full 5 seconds, Zhu Huichuan's voice finally rang out again. This time, his tone was full of furious anger and disbelief, and even his voice trembled. Who are you? Where is Jiangxi? Tell her to answer the phone. Hasn't she had enough of this low-class ploy of hiring extras to anger me? I am her legally wedded husband. He Yang spoke calmly. Also, Mr. Zhu. Jiangxi's older brother passed away 3 years ago. If you want to threaten her with medical expenses, please queue at Section 2 of Nanshan Cemetery. Now, please do not disturb my wife while she rests. After finishing, He Yang hung up the phone directly and casually dragged the number into the blacklist. Did I bother you? He set the phone aside and continued to knead my calf, as if he had just swatted a pesky fly. No, I looked at him, a genuine smile spreading in my eyes. He Yang, thank you. Thank what? He lowered his head and pressed a light kiss on my forehead. Protecting Mrs. He is my duty. Are you hungry? I'll go bring the pepper chicken soup warmed in the kitchen. Watching his retreating figure, a sense of unprecedented reassurance welled up inside me. On the other hand, Zhu Huichuan, who had just returned to the country and was still in the airport VIP channel, glared with bloodshot eyes at his phone which had just been hung up. President Zhu, the wedding dress shop, is still waiting. The assistant nearby whispered with trepidation. Look it up, find out. Zhu Huichuan roared like a furious beast, smashing the phone to pieces with one hand. Find out what exactly He Yang is. Did Jiangxi dare to marry and bear a child behind my back? Is she crazy? He had always thought that the breakup years ago was just my tantrum, that if he left me alone for AF for a few years, as long as my brother still needed medical fees, I would forever be the dog in his hand. He had no idea that the cage had fallen long ago, and that bird had long flown away. Zhu Huichuan moved faster than I imagined. The next afternoon, I heard the hubbub outside the VIP suite of the confinement center. Move aside, I am Jiangxi's fiancé. Who among you dares to stop me? Zhu Huichuan's voice was full of an irrepressible frenzy. He had 2 important professional classes in the afternoon and wasn't staying at the center to accompany me. Understanding this, he looked at me with a hint of worry. Let him in. I sat on the sofa, holding a bowl of steaming red date kanji in my hands, speaking calmly. The door was torn open, and Zhu Huichuan, with an aura of coldness, rushed in. He wore a finely tailored haute couture suit, but the eye sockets around his eyes were a violent red. When he saw me on the sofa, his whole body froze in an instant. I was no longer the Jiangxi who, 3 years ago, always wore plain clothes, had a pale face, and eyes that showed flattery and timidity. I wore soft silk loungewear, my long hair casually tied back, my complexion flushed, and that inner ease and radiance nourished by love pierced his eyes like a blade. What he found hardest to accept was that in the transparent crib beside me, a delicate and exquisitely carved baby girl was peacefully asleep. Jiangxi, Zhu Huichuan's Adam's apple rolled hard, his voice dry and hoarse. You really got married, and you even have a child. He stared at the child as if it were some unforgivable evidence. Mr. Zhu. Barging into private space is very rude. I lowered the porcelain bowl, not giving him an extra glance. If you're here for that 50,000 to settle accounts, I've already transferred it back to your account. If you're here to reminisce, sorry, there's nothing to reminisce about. Zhu Huichuan suddenly rushed over, both hands resting on the coffee table, his gaze oppressive. I don't believe it. Are you here to get back at me for not taking you on a honeymoon back then? Is it because I accompanied Lin Yarrow abroad that you casually found a man to marry? Jiangxi, you're destroying yourself. He Yang is just a poor teacher. What can he give you? Isn't your brother's illness in need of money anymore? Ju Chuan, do you not understand human speech? I looked up at him directly, with pity rather than anger in my eyes. My brother died 3 years ago, on the day you hung up 47 of my calls because of Lin Yao's depression. Ju Chuan's face instantly turned pale. He staggered backward as if unable to digest this fact. Dead, how could that be? I clearly told the doctor before I left, he muttered incoherently. Then, as if clutching at a lifebuoy, he suddenly raised his head. Then how have you been these 3 years? You have no money, no job. How could you possibly survive out there with that cowardly personality? I suddenly laughed, a laugh of pure ridicule. Cowardly. I stood up and walked. I said to him, Ju Chuan, you always say I'm cowardly and not fit for the workplace, but you're not afraid I'll be wronged outside. You're afraid I'll see the outside world and no longer regard you as the only sky, right? You used to tell me not to wear makeup, saying my bare face is the most beautiful. But it's really because you're afraid I'll be too eye-catching and attract others' attention. You cut off my social life, saying you're my only support, but actually it's to make it easier to control me at any time. I watched his expression gradually crumble, and I pronounced each word slowly. Your sweet talk is nothing but a soft knife that kills invisibly, and he Yang is different. He would say to me, ginger juice, go shine, and the child has me, the family has me. He respects every one of my recipes, remembers that I can't drink water below 40 degrees during my menstrual period, and remembers that I can't stand the scent of cheap camphor. I pointed to the door, my voice as cold as ice. Director Ju, your proud wealth, in my eyes now, isn't even worth a bowl of porridge that he Yang cooks for me. Get out. Ju Chuan froze in place, like a sculpture shattered by a broken belief. He had always considered himself a god who controlled everything, only to realize that he was nothing but a comical clown. In the end, he was escorted out by the security at the maternity center, but I know his temperament well enough to know that this won't end here. As expected, 2 days later, an uninvited guest knocked on the door of the suite. It was Lin Yao. She still looked as frail and delicate as a wilting willow branch, wearing a pure white dress, with slightly reddened eyes, and holding an expensive fruit basket. Miss Jiang, I heard you gave birth to a daughter, so I came to see you. Her voice was soft and gentle. With an inherent innocence, I watched her quietly without letting her in. Miss Lin, we don't seem to be on a level where we can visit each other. Lin Yao bit her lip, and tears instantly welled up. With red eyes, she spoke in a deliberately frail tone. Miss Jiang, please don't blame Chuan. For the past 3 years abroad, although he accompanied me to treat my illness, his heart has only been with you. Every night, he would look at your photo in a daze. This time when he returned to the country, he rushed to choose a wedding dress. I didn't expect you to. How could you be so cruel, turning around and marrying someone else? On the surface, this seems like a plea. But in reality, it is a crazy assertion of sovereignty. Look, the person who stayed by his side for these 3 years is me. 3 years ago, I might have been pierced and unable to be. I used to think she was cute, but now I only feel that she looks like a clumsy little clown. Miss Lin, your acting has regressed. I let out a soft laugh, pulled a brown craft paper envelope from the drawer, and tossed it at her feet. Has he been thinking only of me these 3 years? I looked coldly at the sudden change in her face. This is your and his 2-year itinerary abroad. He accompanied you to watch 24 sunsets, went skiing in Switzerland, and went shopping in Paris, and on the day my brother passed away, you were posting that 2 million necklace on your moments. Lin Yao's face stiffened instantly, and she instinctively argued, that's because I was sick and needed care. Chuan is kind. Kind, I interrupted her, my gaze suddenly sharp. Do you know what this so-called kind savior did behind your back? I opened my phone and pulled up a text message screenshot I had treasured for 3 years, that was found while sorting through my brother's belongings, a draft he failed to send before his death. I aimed the screen at Lin Yao and at Ju Chuan, who had just received the news and forcibly kicked open the hospital room door to rush in. The moment Ju Chuan saw the screenshot, it felt like a bolt from the blue, and he stood frozen in place. The content of the message was clearly visible. Chirp, my brother isn't going to live long. Don't beg Ju Chuan for me anymore. Yesterday, I heard him on the phone in the hallway. instructing the doctors to stop my life-saving import drugs. "Don't save me with all you've got, just keep me breathing," he said. He said that as long as I'm sick for a day, you'll never be out of his control. Squeak, run, he's a madman. No, this isn't real. Zhu Huichuan lunatically pounced to grab the phone, but Yang, who had just arrived, pressed him to the ground. "Zhu Huichuan, you have always thought you were a bodhisattva saving lives, an aloof giver." I looked down at the miserable man on the ground with a superior gaze, hatred and disgust curdling in my eyes. "In truth, you are a butcher who would kill to satisfy your need for control. My brother's life was dragged away by you. Do you think you're keeping me?" I bent down, staring into his eyes that instantly filled with despair and fear, and I enunciated slowly, "You are the one who killed all the possibilities between us." Lin Yao sat paralyzed on the ground in fear. The fruit basket tipped with a loud clatter as the fruits rolled everywhere. Zhu Huichuan lay on the cold tiles, like a dog drained of its spine. A heart-wrenching, desperate wail tore from his throat. He finally realized that what he had lost was not just the compliant ginger juice, but the soul he had crushed with his own hands, a soul that would never be retrieved in this lifetime. On the day we left the confinement center, the first fragrance of autumn Osman thus drifted into High City. There was no grand, noisy spectacle. Yang drove the understated Volvo, with the back seat laid with the softest cashmere blanket. He had already set the car's interior temperature to a cons. It seems this part is incomplete in the original text, but I've proofread up to this point based on what's given. The temperature was 26 degrees, and the car fragrance was changed to my favorite white tea and would blend an aroma that calms the mind and aids sleep. "Professor I'm actually all better now. You don't have to treat me like fragile goods." Looking at him carefully placing the sleeping Jifeng into the car seat and then turning to buckle my seatbelt, I couldn't help but smile wryly. Yang's movements were light. His warm fingertips accidentally brushed my cheekbone, and his eyes were full of tender warmth and solemnity. In others' eyes, you are the soaring figure of the famed perfumer, but here, you are simply the ginger juice that needs protection. You are the most important lesson of my life, and not a single slip is tolerated. His words contained no word love, yet they carved partiality into my bones. The car smoothly entered the city and finally stopped in front of Haiching's most artistic venue, Cloudtop Art Museum. I looked in astonishment at the giant storefront window, where a huge poster hung, "No people, only a shattered perfume bottle repaired with kintsugi," with the 4 large characters in the center, "Shadow of Freedom, Personal Olfactory Art Exhibition." I covered my mouth in surprise and then turned to Yang. "Is this a gift for me?" Yang unbuckled his seatbelt, and his gaze was soft and steady on me. "In the past 3 years, you left behind too many stunning works in the studio. Ginger juice, those fragrances concocted in the dark should not be locked away in drawers. They should be blown by the wind to go farther, so that everyone can smell the scent of your soul's rebirth." My eyes grew moist in an instant. Once upon a time, Zhu Huichuan would look at the test tubes spread across my desk, frown, sweep them into the trash, and in a condescending, patronizing tone say, "Gigi, girls get involved with all these vials and bottles. The smell of chemical reagents sticks to you, and it's unpleasant. The woman of Zhu Huichuan only needs to spray the high-fashion perfume I buy every day, sit cleanly in the living room and wait for me." He cut off my wings, yet mocked me for not being able to fly, and Yang not only gave me a sky but personally built the launch platform for me to take off. On the day of the exhibition opening, it was a gathering of celebrities. I wore a sharply cut black suit dress, discarded all elaborate jewelry, and only wore a simple pair of pearl studs at the ears. I was no longer the delicate white-dressed flock swayed by Zhu Huichuan's taste, but the absolute ruler of this olfactory feast. The exhibition was divided into 3 zones: cage, pupa, and freedom. Each fragrance recorded the mental journey from near death to rebirth. Just as I was introducing the flagship scent Corrosion to several top international perfume critics, a commotion erupted behind the crowd. Zhu Huichuan arrived. He still wore a carefully tailored haute couture suit, but his figure looked thinner than in the days at the postnatal care center. He carried a large, vividly lush bouquet of perfume lilies, and with the bodyguards clearing a path, he walked straight to me. "Gigi, Congratulations, Ju Huichuan's eyes fixed on me, with nearly obsessive zeal and flattery. I heard you're holding an exhibition. Oh, a perfume exhibition. I bought up all the nearby advertising space to promote you. Look at this bouquet of perfume lilies. I specially air freighted them from the Netherlands. You used to love placing them in the living room. He tried to announce his presence in such a flamboyant display of money, hoping to awaken the so-called past. I lowered my gaze to glance at the lilies. Their strong scent made me feel physically sick. Mr. Ju, please move it farther away. I stepped back half a pace, my voice cold as ice. What happened? Is it not fresh? Ju Huichuan was a bit astonished. At this moment, a cup of warm water was handed to me. Heian had somehow moved to my side, naturally taking the perfume testing strip from my hand, and with the other arm wrapped around my shoulder, safeguarding me. Within a completely safe distance, Heian's gaze swept lightly over the flowers in Ju Huichuan's hand. His tone was calm yet piercing. Mr. Ju, Gigi has a severe allergy to the pollen of lilies, and smelling this scent will trigger serious asthma and urticaria. Ju Huichuan stood frozen in place, his expression instantly stiff, like a clown slapped across the face. How is that possible? She never said. He trailed off. You never truly cared about her. I coldly looked at him. Back then in that villa, every time you bought me Lil, yes, I would secretly take 2 doses of loratadine in the middle of the night because you thought lilies symbolized nobility, symbolizing the taste you bestowed upon me. If I refused, you would think I didn't appreciate your kindness. Ju Huichuan, what you call knowing me best is only the personal preference you forced upon me. You love a perfect, doll-like exhibition of your control, not her. The surrounding murmurs gradually rose, those probing and mocking gazes stung Ju Huichuan like needles. The prideful dignity he had been so sure of at this moment was torn to shreds. Ginger juice, are you getting back at me? Ju Huichuan's Adam's apple rolled violently, his voice dry. You deliberately make these perfumes, deliberately stand beside this man, just to scare me. I know Lin Yao's affair hurt you back then, but your brother's death was an accident. I didn't want it either. I gently twist the wedding ring on my finger, my gaze ice cold as it slides over him and lands on the huge exhibition poster behind him. Ju Huichuan, since you've come today, you might as well take a good whiff of the scent here. I casually pick up a bottle of perfume on the display stand named Abyss and spray it lightly into the air. An extremely bitter scent instantly fills the space, mixing with the smell of rotten food and disinfectant. The top note of this perfume is the cold disinfectant scent of a hospital ICU. The middle note is the cigar scent of the brand you love smoking the most, and the base note is the ash smell of bone ash in an incinerator. I watched Ju Huichuan's face turn as white as paper in an instant, and I say slowly, this is not just an exhibition, this is a spiritual funeral I'm holding for you and for my brother. Ju Huichuan staggers back 2 steps, the perfume lily in his hand falls to the ground, and the white petals are trampled under the feet of the surrounding guests, ground into dust. He gently holds my hand that has grown a little cooler from excitement. He turns to the media and guests present, his voice gentle yet carrying the power of thunder. Ladies and gentlemen, a fresh introduction. This is Ms. Yingdao, the shadow of an international independent perfumer, and she is also the only wife He Yang, will have in this life. Jiangji is not anyone's accessory, she is herself, and she is my fate. Anyone who tries to bind her with the past, He Yang, will never show mercy. The applause thunders. Ju Huichuan stands at the edge of the crowd, watching me, who is under the spotlight, tightly holding hands with He Yang. He finally realizes, the Jiangji who once could only hide in his shadow, miserably begging for him to glance back, has long since been utterly killed by his indifference and arrogance. The current Jiangji shines brilliantly, but no longer has anything to do with him. After leaving from the art gallery, Ju Huichuan went mad, turning into a complete obsessive. He couldn't accept that he had lost to a poor schoolteacher and could no longer bear it. More importantly, he couldn't accept that I not only wasn't ruined by him but instead rose to a spiritual pedestal in this life that he could never reach. On a late autumn night, a heavy downpour drenched Haicheng, the temperature plummeted, and the cold wind, along with the rain, scraped the streets like blades. Ju Huichuan didn't bring an umbrella. Wearing a thin shirt, He stood alone in front of the independent villa gate at Haicheng University compound where He Yang and I reside. "Jiangji, come out, we need to talk," he shouted loudly in the rain, and his voice was quickly swallowed by the torrential downpour. He pounded the intricately wrought iron door with force. Like a stray scavenger dog, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of the second-floor baby's room, holding the newborn who had just finished nursing. The baby's eyes were closed, and it was blowing bubbles. The underfloor heating inside gave off a soft warmth. He Yang wore grey loungewear, sitting on the carpet nearby, holding a colorful picture book, and reading the story in a low, gentle voice. The little fox finally found his own forest, where there are no hunter's traps, only wildflowers that bloom forever for him. He Yang closed the book and looked up at me. Thunder roared outside the window, and Zhu Huichuan's roar was faintly carried in. "Do you want me to tell the guard to drive him away?" He Yang came over. He gently took our sleeping daughter from my arms and, with a blanket, wrapped us together. "No need." I didn't even pull aside the thin gauze curtain, just calmly watched the raindrops slide down the glass. I used to wait for him in the rain as well. That day, my brother's critical illness notification had just come. Disregarding everything, I ran to the downstairs of his company and stood in the rain for 4 hours, just to get him to sign and cover the medical fees. He was in the top floor office drinking red wine, not even showing his face. He said, "Young man, you have to endure a bit of rain to learn what it means to be truly sensible." A cold, sardonic smile curved at the corners of my mouth. Now it's his turn to learn that lesson. Zhu Huichuan knelt in the heavy rain outside for an entire night. He thought this kind of cruel ploy would awaken in me that sick dependence on him, that I would, like those women softened by his PUA manipulations, soften and run out to hug him. But by the next morning when the sanitation truck rolled past this door, he still couldn't find even a crack. The coldness of his body was nothing compared to the despair of having his dignity ground into dust. Zhu Huichuan, carrying a high fever, returned to his villa under his own name. His twisted pride burst forth, and he unleashed a nearly crazy style of revenge. Kill 800 enemies, lose 1,000 yourself. He mobilized all the funds and connections of the Zhu group, attempting to blacklist He Yang in business and academia. Dig into He Yang's background, check if he committed academic fraud, and examine the money flow behind him. I will ruin him and let Jiangji see that the man she chooses apart from me is merely a discarded waste that can be crushed with a single squeeze. Zhu Huichuan smashed all the antique vases in his office, his eyes red as he roared at his assistant. Yet, that set of hard-nosed logic that had always worked in the business world was, in the face of real depth, nothing but a joke. He Yang's family was not a nouveau riche with a mountain of wealth. For 3 generations before, they had been authorities in the domestic academic circle. His grandfather was a member of the Academy of Sciences enjoying national special allowances, and his disciples and old colleagues were spread across the political and academic worlds. This profound cultural heritage and the status of a stalwart integrity clean current could not be shaken by Zhu Huichuan's scheming and the stench of his money-spun schemes. Zhu Huichuan's suppression not only failed to wound He Yang by a hair's breadth, but instead, due to his opportunistic quick-fix moves and violations, drew the attention of relevant departments. A more fatal blow came from his most trusted Jiuhua Lin Yao. Lin Yao has always been extremely practical. At first, she feigned illness to threaten death to keep Zhu Huichuan because what she valued was his strong ability to attract money and his extravagance. When the relevant departments entered Zhu's group to audit Zhu, due to Zhu Huichuan's overseas illegal asset transfers and massive tax evasion over the past 2 years, the Zhu family's financial chain fractured overnight, multiple assets were seized, and everything fell apart. Lin Yao, upon learning that Zhu Huichuan's assets were frozen and that he might face prison, quietly moved several houses and jewels that she had previously purchased under her name on a stormy night. Lin Yao carried a platinum bag and sat down in a business magnate's Maybach with a crisp, decisive air. Zhu Huichuan chased after the car in the garage, staring incredulously at the woman he had once gone to great lengths to protect, even risking his own brother's life. "Yao Yao, what are you doing? Didn't you say you couldn't live without me?" His voice trembled as he tried to pull open the car door. Lin Yao looked through the car window at Zhu Huichuan's ruined state, removing her sunglasses. Her eyes were full of unabashed disdain and sharpness. Huaichuan, people have to keep moving forward. My illness needs a lot of money, and you can't even sort out your own mess. What can you offer to support me? You always thought I couldn't live without you, but in fact you enjoyed that sense of patronizing charity. Now that you're bankrupt, I'm done with this game. The car drove away, splashing Zhu Huichuan with mud. In that moment, he stood in the empty underground garage, suddenly bursting into a piercingly frantic, hysterical laugh, laughing so hard that he could barely straighten up. With tears mixing with muddy water as they flowed into his mouth, he finally understood that the half-life pursuit of a sense of dependency was nothing but an illusory phantom. He used every method to drive away the infatuation that filled his gaze, but in exchange, he gained a money-grubbing parasite that fed only on wealth. What was called true love and control turned out to be a sad joke he had directed and performed himself. The late autumnal chill grew day by day, due to that stormy night, the fever, and the mental strain. Zhu Huichuan contracted severe acute pneumonia. He curled up in front of a villa door that had already been sealed, his high fever erasing his consciousness. In the fog, it seemed like it was 5 years ago that winter. He suffered a stomach bleed while trying to secure a big project at a wine banquet. It was Jiangji, that woman who always stayed at home, who ran out in the deep cold of -10 degrees, wearing only a thin sweater, to the Chinese medicine shop to fetch medicine. He remembered lying on a soft bed, his stomach churning, Jiangji bringing him a kanji of dried tangerine peel and lean pork that had simmered for 3 hours, blowing it cool and feeding it into his mouth bit by bit. Jiangji's eyes were red, her voice trembling with heartache. Huichuan, don't drink so much next time, your health matters. And what was his reply then? Impatiently, he pushed the bowl away and coldly said, Jiangji, what do you know? This is the world of men. You just stay at home, spend my money, and don't use your petty tears to. He didn't want a maid who could only make kanji. Later, Jiangji herself ran a high fever from exhaustion. At that moment, she was accompanying Lin Yao to a painting exhibition and weakly told him on the phone, Huaichuan, I'm so cold, can you come back and take me to the hospital? But he looked at Lin Yao, who had a smile on her face next to him because of a painting, and coldly replied into the phone, Jiangji, drink more hot water, stop lamenting your illness all day. Lin Yao's emotions have finally stabilized a bit. I can't leave. More hot water. Zhu Huichuan lay on the cold asphalt, his cracked lips trembling slightly as he murmured incoherently, Squeak, I'm cold, I want hot soup. But besides the whistling autumn wind, no one answered him. When he was woken up by a nurse in the hospital corridor and told that their medical account balance was insufficient, that physical and psychological collapse finally crushed his last shred of rationality. He pulled out the 4 needle from the back of his hand and, like a wandering ghost, wandered back near my home as if bewitched. It was a weekend afternoon, the weather was nice, and sunlight poured onto the lawn covered with fallen leaves. I was sitting on the swing in the yard, a soft wool blanket draped over my legs. Yang had laid out a picnic mat on the nearby lawn. I patiently jiggled a small rattle to amuse Jifeng, who could barely sit up. Look here, Dad. Yang's voice was so gentle that it seemed to drip with water. I watched this scene, and the corner of my mouth couldn't help but curl up. The early autumn breeze was a bit chilly, so I only frowned slightly, not even opening my mouth, and Yang immediately sensed it. He set aside the toy, strode quickly to the warming station, and picked up a bowl of longan and red date sweet soup that had been warmed there long ago. He tested the temperature and then calmly brought it in front of me. It's windy now. Have a hot sip to warm your stomach. We'll go inside in 10 more minutes, so you won't catch a chill. Saying this, he handed me the bowl and neatly tucked the edge of the blanket around me as well. I took the hot soup, and the sweet, glutinous aroma lingered at the tip of my nose. This bowl of soup didn't require me to wait 3 hours, didn't require me to beg with tears. It came to me naturally, full of love, right in front of my eyes. Zhu Huichuan hid behind the dense row of holly trees outside the yard, staring at this scene with his eyes red as blood. He was consumed with jealousy. That was Jiangji, who belonged to him, Jiangji who would become tense for half a day just because he frowned. Why is he laughing so brightly at another man now? Why? The position that belongs to him. Now someone else is standing there under the dual torment of jealousy and a fever. Zhu Huaichuan completely lost his rationality. He saw He Yang turn to go inside the house to fetch a blanket, and from somewhere, a burst of strength erupted in him. He jumped over the rather low wall, staggered toward Jifeng on the lawn. There was only one crazy thought in his mind: take this child away. Once he had this child, Jiangxi would suffer, would come back into his sight, would beg him, "Jiangxi, you are mine. You cannot be with anyone else." Zhu Huaichuan roared and pounced onto the picnic mat. The 6-month-old Jifeng cried loudly in fear as a suddenly appeared, bearded, vicious-eyed stranger frightened him. The porcelain bowl in my hand clanged to the ground, shattering into countless pieces. "Zhu Huaichuan, what are you doing?" Almost instinctively as a mother, I lunged forward in a frenzy, shielding Jifeng in my arms, and at the same time kicked his shin bone hard with my foot. Zhu Huaichuan, already weak, was knocked violently onto the grass by my kick, but he still refused to give up. Stretching out his hand to grab my ankle, "Chu, you come with me. I only have you." At that moment, a tall figure rushed out of the house like a gust of wind. He Yang kicked Zhu Huaichuan 3 meters away with one foot. This Urbane University professor, for the first time in his life, raised his hand in violence in front of others. He protected me and Jifeng tightly behind him, towering over the pained, curled up Zhu Huaichuan on the ground, his eyes filled with fierce killing intent. "Zhu Huaichuan, if you dare to lay a finger on them, the mother and daughter, again, I promise you won't walk out of this courtyard today." Jifeng, protected in my arms, sobbed while pointing with his chubby little finger at Zhu Huaichuan on the ground, crying in a muffled voice, "Bad uncle, go away." The 3 words "bad uncle" were like a dull, rusty saw, violently carving through Zhu Huaichuan's heart. He lay on the ground, watching the defensiveness and disgust in my eyes. Watching He Yang standing in front of me like a mountain, listening to the child who might have called him father in the first place, nail him to the pillar of villain with the most innocent voice. His pride in control, his self-righteous affection, was completely stripped away at this moment. He looked like a petty clown, so dirty, superfluous, and pathetic in this courtyard full of humanity and love, having lost all stance, if bankruptcy and estrangement were the price of his arrogance. Then the subsequent reckoning would be the harshest judgment by law and cause for him. The day after Zhu Huaichuan was taken away by He Yang's police report, an anonymous email quietly arrived at the email addresses of the Economic Investigation Brigade and Criminal Investigation Brigade of Haicheng Public Security Bureau. The email contained detailed accounts and recordings of Zhu Group's 5 years of tax evasion, illegal transfer of funds, and money laundering through shell companies. These did not appear out of thin air. For the past 3 years, I never really stood idly by, countless late nights, relying on the clues I happened to grasp around Zhu Huaichuan and the channels He Yang provided through legitimate academic networks. I patiently pieced together the complete map of his criminal empire, like a patient spider. More importantly, at the bottom of the email was an encrypted video file named Recovered Version of Surveillance Outside Nanshan Hospital Operating Room 3 years ago. After my brother died on the operating table, Zhu Huaichuan used his connections to wipe the monitoring to cover up the dirty operation, but he didn't know that the fellow patient in the ICU he met was a highly skilled cybersecurity engineer who had already stored a backup long before his actions. For the past 3 years, I have been looking for this person, and only half a month ago did I finally obtain this recovered high-definition surveillance. The police car screeched to a stop in front of the sealed villa gate. Zhu Huaichuan, who had just paid bail and was still catching his breath, was once again placed in silver cuffs. On the day of the trial, Haicheng was drizzling. I, in a black professional outfit, sat in the first row of the public seating. When the recovered video was played on the court's big screen, the room fell into dead silence. The image quality was rough, but the sound was clear and chilling. Zhu Huaichuan, wearing a meticulous high-end suit, stood in a corridor corner not 10 meters from the operating room. Holding a phone, his tone cold, as if discussing unimportant goods. "Director Zhong, I'll repeat it one more time. You don't have to push it to the limit, just keep him barely alive. If he dies, Jiangxi loses his vulnerable point. If is okay." Jiangxi will take him away from me, so he can only lie there half dead inside. This was not only a disdain for life but a deliberate act of murder to satisfy a morbid need for control. The defendant Zhu Huaichuan's face turned ashen, his eyes were fixed on the screen, and his body trembled like a sieve. He knew it was all over when the judge struck the gavel for multiple offenses: intentional injury, tax evasion, illegal operation, and others, and sentenced him to 15 years in prison with all personal assets confiscated. Zhu Huaichuan collapsed in his chair before leaving the courtroom. Zhu Huaichuan suddenly, like a madman, broke free from the bailiff's restraints and pounced toward the spectator seating rail. He gripped the rail with both hands so hard that his wrists bled from the handcuffs. His once arrogant eyes were now filled with despair, remorse, and pleading. Gigi, look at me. I know I'm wrong, really know I'm wrong. I was just so afraid of losing you, so in love with you, that I used extreme methods. Can you forgive me? Wait for me another 15 years. When I come out, I'll work for you like a beast. His love was, to put it bluntly, a most vicious blasphemy. I slowly stood up and, across the bars, calmly watched the man who had exhausted my youth to look up to. At this moment, he was like a pill. The stench of rotten garbage filled the air. Zhu Huaichuan. I looked down at him from above. My tone was devoid of anger or sorrow, only an extreme indifference that saw through everything. There's no need to feign deep affection. You've never loved me. What you loved was only that property of yours, which, due to my brother's medical expenses, was forced to bow and cling to you. Like a dog after you deprived me of all means of survival, my brother's life, my 3 years of youth, and your self-righteous arrogance are all finally settled today. I turned and offered my hand to He Yang, who had always stood quietly behind me. Behind me, Zhu Huaichuan's hysterical plea rang out. Ziji, please. Just say one sentence to me at the end, just one sentence. I paused but didn't turn back. My cold voice echoed in the empty courtroom, delivering the final verdict: until we meet again, never again. Time passed. 3 years later, autumn in Haicheng remained windy, but this year the wind seemed especially gentle. In the vast city CBD square, an LED screen scrolled the latest season's advertisement of the world's top perfume brand Ziying. In the frame, I wore a minimalist white dress, standing in a blooming Bulgarian rose field, closing my eyes to feel the touch of the wind. At the bottom of the screen, a line of gilded text floated quietly: Ziying, reshaping the soul in the name of freedom. In the corner of the square, a man in a yellowed old jacket, his hair mostly grey, paused to gaze at the screen. He carried a worn canvas bag on his back, his spine stooped like he is a 60-year-old in appearance, yet he is actually only in his 30s. Due to his good conduct in prison and the various favors the Zhu family had bestowed in the past, Zhu Huaichuan was granted a reduced sentence and released early. But in the years that followed, day after day of high-intensity labor and endless remorse had worn him down to an unrecognizable state. The face he once took pride in had become gaunt with age, and those eyes full of control were now only clouded and dull. He stared blankly at the shining me on the screen. His hand unconsciously slipped into his pocket and touched a blurred old photo soaked with sweat. That was a photo from 5 years ago, when we hadn't broken up yet, and he thought I was too plainly dressed. It was also his last remaining memory of half his life. A gust of autumn wind blew by, lifting the leaves on the ground. Zhu Huaichuan hunched his neck and strolled aimlessly along the familiar street. Unknowingly, he stopped in front of the most famous Gothic cathedral in Haicheng. 5 years ago, he swore to hold a grand wedding for me here, and here, he casually told me to wait 2 more years just to accompany Lin Yaro abroad. At this moment, the hall was filled with flowers and balloons, and a romantic symphony poured out. Someone was getting married. Zhu Huaichuan stood beneath the steps, watching the guests' laughter and cheers. His heart clenched as if gripped by an invisible hand, and he bent over in pain. At that moment, a low-key luxurious black car slowly stopped in front of the flower shop opposite the hall. The car door opens, and a tall, gentle-looking man steps out first. He carefully holds the umbrella, shielding us from the early autumn breeze, then turns and gently helps the woman out of the car. That is He Yang, and the woman is me. I cradle a bouquet of pure white astilbes, the flowers my brother loved most in life. Today is his memorial day. We are going to Nanshan Cemetery to sweep the tomb. The 4-year-old Jifeng runs in, wearing a pretty little windbreaker, hopping along beside us, clutching a small pinwheel. Mom, the windmill is spinning. The clear laughter echoes along the street. Look where you're going and be careful not to fall, I tease with a smile, my eyes calm with the tranquil years. Yenny holds Jifeng's hand with one hand and naturally pulls my thin jacket closer with the other. The wind's a bit strong. Once this wind dies down we'll get in the car. Okay. I look up at him with a radiant smile, and we walk through the sidewalk together, chatting and laughing, toward the cemetery. Ju Huichuan stands in the shadow of a street corner less than 5 meters away, stiff all over, lips trembling violently. He wants to shout Gigi, to rush up and say that he has come out, to confess that he has been repenting every day these past years, but when he sees He Yang's gaze toward me, so gentle that it seems to be able to draw silk, and sees the relaxed happiness on my face that only comes from being deeply loved, he finds his throat sealed by cement, unable to utter a sound. He didn't even dare to take a step, for fear that the vulgarity and misery in him would dirty the road beneath my feet. We passed completely through his life like this, brushing past in an instant. The wind lifted the hem of my clothes, and I didn't spare a single sideways glance for the stranger in the shadows. In my world, the name Ju Huichuan had, 5 years ago on that rainy day, been swept into the junk pile of history together with the discarded wedding dress. Gigi, are you cold? We're going home. He Yang's gentle voice rose in the wind. I reached out to clasp his warm, broad hand and pulled the plume of starry flowers in my chest even closer. Not cold, facing the golden sunset, I smiled and answered, okay, home. As the wind blew, I didn't look back, because ahead, there is a lifetime of spring.